What is up, everybody? Welcome back to my continued trek through the Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation novel series. I am now on volume 3, not 2, but I figured that if I cover 3, then eventually it'll restock, because that's what happened with 2. But no, jokes aside, I am just about done with the volume, honestly, but what I found with this one is it's very well covered in the anime with the first season, but there's quite a bit more, especially with Ruijerd. So much more insight into Ruijerd, the spears, and all that kind of stuff, and I cannot wait to dive into it. So yes, as usual, this is from the perspective of somebody that has watched the anime, so I'll be touching on the differences quite a bit with this, but really giving my perspective of what I felt really hit with the novel series. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Kicking off volume 3 with the first chapter, the first thing, like the first line, we immediately hit some stuff that was never shown in the anime, and honestly, boggles my mind. It really does not make much sense to me why they chose to not. This is essentially where Rudeus and Eris are being transported. We had this whole mana disaster, the displacement disaster, and in the opening of the third volume, Rudeus is literally jetting through the air. Like it explains that he is literally flying through the air, and he's holding onto Eris, and the entire time he's looking down below him, looking at all these areas where he's going to hit something. There's a mountain there. Where am I going to finally land? When is my velocity going to end? And I'm going to splat to the ground. Where can I land that I'm not going to die, essentially? And I was, again, very surprised. Why wasn't this adapted? Like, why couldn't we show him just jetting through the air? It was really, truly puzzling. But yes, he's contemplating this, and immediately he jumps to essentially being before the Man-God. This is where his vision shifts. He's now in this big, bright area. And yes, before him is the Man-God, and himself as his old self. And he's really hitting heavy, like throughout the entire, like for our first 2 experiences with the Man-God in the novel, it's really hitting heavy on the idea that he doesn't like it, obviously. He sees his old self. He feels nasty. He feels, crap, it was just a dream. All this stuff that I did with about Rudeus, all a dream. But the Man-God obviously tells him, no, that's real. You're actually there. It's just, this is your inner perspective of yourself. And me and Chris have talked quite a bit as we were reading through watching through the first season. Curious if there'll be this moment where he'll finally see himself as Rudeus inside of his mind, because so far what we've seen with the first adaptation, he's always seen himself as his old self, his old, what he would see as his ugly self. But additionally, kind of hitting heavy on the idea that the longer he's there, the more he feels like his experience as being Rudeus is fleeting. Like he's quickly seeing those memories kind of fading. He doesn't like being here because of that. Yes, he ends up kind of explaining that he thinks this mosaic person in front of him might be Sperm Man or something like that. Making a bunch of jokes, obviously not trusting the Man-God. See him as a cheap salesman that's trying to trick him into something, a con man. And similarly in the anime, he does mention at some point that this whole idea of him being reincarnated to this world definitely wasn't done by the Man-God. He can't send people to and from areas outside of the six-faced world. That the idea of reincarnation into this world from another world, that's not his department. That's something that as a specialty of a certain wicked dragon god. But after a back and forth, yes, eventually the Man-God tries to explain to him, look, I'm trying to give you some advice. When you wake up, you're going to be before somebody. Trust that person and help that person, which when he does finally wake up, ends up being Ruijerd the Superb. There wasn't really too much in the novel that was different regarding the conversation with Ruijerd. It really does emphasize this idea that he was terrified of Ruijerd, constantly questioning what was told from him in the past. This idea of, like, I love especially him saying, you know, do I trust more? This random guy, the Man-God, that's claiming to be the Man-God, or do I trust my beloved teacher, which was Roxy? There's a little bit of emphasis put here on the idea that he does acknowledge that despite the fact that discrimination has pretty much been long gone, I mean, yes, there's still that. It's still there. I mean, we touched on it quite a bit when we were talking about the Beast People at the mansion, at Saros's mansion. And it's similar here. Despite the fact that it seems like discrimination should be gone, Superbs were the only one that everybody still fears, and everybody still shuns. In questioning, Ruijerd ends up finding that he's in the Bigoya region, in the northeastern of the Demon Continent, which Rudeus states is pretty much on the opposite side of the maps. Like, we're way over here. Rudeus equates the distance being equal to that of going from, like, Paris to Las Vegas, which is insane. Yes, eventually Eris wakes up. She freaks out as expected. I like how much emphasis Rudeus gives on trying to be very polite and create some sort of bond with Ruijerd very quickly, because he knows eventually Eris is going to wake up, and he's trying to let him know, look, she's going to wake up and she's going to freak out please be patient with her, basically. But yes, she ends up waking up. She freaks out. I love this because as I was reading this segment of it, I got nostalgic to the end of the first season. That later segment where you do have that parting of ways. And it's really cute. It's similar to when I first I did rewatch of Mushoku Tensei, and seeing that moment that Eris first met Rudeus and how combative she was, compared to what we kind of see them at the end of the first season. Seeing that character growth and sort of seeing the reverse effect of ungrowth is very nostalgic. Jumping into chapter 3, here was a very puzzling part. And again, emphasis on the idea that if you know the answer to this and it's beyond what we've gotten already, I don't want to know. I don't want spoilers. I'm just speculating here and trying to figure out things. But no, at the beginning of chapter 3, we have this brief moment where Rudeus is sleeping. This is after Eris and Ruijerd have gotten a little comfortable. He decides to take a nap. And he has a dream where he sees a group of angels descending upon him. And he says they're giggling in unison. They have creepy grins. But then he wakes up. He forces himself to wake up. And he said he's been having these nightmares a lot lately. No clue what they're talking about here. Maybe all I can think of is that it's trying to, he's having like an overlay of nightmares of his previous memories. Maybe these laughing angels are children bullying him and laughing at him and taking pictures of him in the past, all looking down upon him. I don't know why he would explain it as a group of angels descending. That's the part that doesn't make any sense to me. So again, it could be him reflecting on his past bullying, or it could be reflecting on something possibly in the future. This is where we basically have them start to travel. He does talk a little bit about, yeah, this is a desolate place. There's a lot of monsters here because there seems to be high concentrations of magic kind of sporadically laid out. They eventually arrive at the village of Migurd, and this is where a lot of really interesting thing comes. And of course, I eat it up because Andrew here, the big fan of Roxy, anything about Roxy and her homeland, I'm always like, yes, please. But no, it kind of everything lays out the same. They arrive there. Ruijerd wants to see the chief. Obviously, we have Roxy's father's at the gate. Rowan doesn't want to let them in. And eventually, Ruijerd pushes him to get the chief, like contact the chief. Now, here was the interesting thing, and this is significantly different than the anime. The anime eventually does get into Roxy and her history. We have this whole flashback sequence where we see Roxy firsthand experience what she was dealing with and why she left. But they establish right here, right at this point, the moment that he arrives at the village, that yes, Roxy left. And why she left. Oh, Rowan's talking to the chief with telepathy. Oh, that's right. I remember Roxy saying something about the fact that she had to leave the village because she couldn't communicate with them that way. Again, this is something we never really got into until we had her backstory. It specifically does mention the idea that the telepathy is only for friends and family. It does make you wonder if there was somebody that was a Migurd that was outside of the tribe. I doubt there are. I don't think we've established quite yet there's outside tribes of Migurds, but if there was other tribes, there was other villages, would they be able to communicate the same way, or would they have to speak to each other? Of course, the chief arrives. We have this little casual conversation with Rowan about Roxy, finding out that she's technically 44 years old. It does have this point where Rudeus is a little happy, like realizing that she's technically the same age as him. He's a little bit happy on that idea. So there you go. People that really think that Rudeus is a terrible person, he was happy to know that Roxy's technically his age. Getting into chapter 4, this is where things get really good. This is where things get really good. But before that, yes, they arrive at the village. Coming in there, he does note the fact that there's mostly women around him. It seems like the men are out hunting at the current time. He notes these plants, which in the anime we've seen Eris is the one that notices them and freaks out about them. These big plants that apparently protect the gardens and stuff. Says there's something right out of a Super Mario game or something like that that would come. No, it says specifically that something that would come out of pipes in a video game. Obviously, they can't say Super Mario. He notes that all the houses are made of shells, and specifically the giant tortoise shells. This is something that they love to take down because their tendons are very good for making bows, and their meat's really delicious, which, according to Rudeus later on, isn't the case. They make it to the chief's hut, they go inside. Immediately, Eris is super tired, so Rudeus offers her to be able to lay her head on his lap, and reluctantly she accepts it and then quickly falls asleep. This is where we have the chief kind of try to figure out what everybody's plan is. After hearing their story and what happened, he starts to get their plan. And Ruijerd obviously quickly jumps in and says, I will guide them home. And the chief's like, no, you can't do that. You can't go into any of the villages. How could you be able to guide them? And this is where we start to touch on this idea that Ruijerd, when it comes to children, is completely unhinged. There's something that he overly dotes on. If children are involved, he can't think straight. They establish that the only reason that they're kind of acceptant of Ruijerd at this town is because several years prior, he did save the life of a child. But we establish the goal of Ruijerd, which is that he wants to clear the name of the Superds. He wants to help people realize that the Superds aren't these wicked monsters, which Rudius immediately jumps on. He's thinking to himself, there's no way. Like, it is so ingrained upon people of this world that Superds are terrible. There's all these stories. They basically scare kids into going to sleep early with the thought of a Superd coming and eating them. And he himself acknowledged the idea that, you know, I've experienced bullying in the past, and just because one person in the classroom stands up and says, stop bullying that person, it never happens. He understands this idea of discrimination and bullying tactics that people do, and he doesn't see any way that Superds are ever going to have a good name. And that's when he splurts out, I mean, obviously nobody's going to like Superds. They attacked friends and enemies alike during the war, which, yes, Ruijerd snaps at. And this is interesting because in the anime, it portrays it as the moment he says that, Ruijerd, like, turns his face, and they get very sketchy with his face, like, almost as if the light from the campfire is warping this terrifying face. I really did like it. In the novel, Ruijerd grabs Rudius by the collar and says it's not true. And so Rudius is like, dude, stop. It's all right, dude. Like, he has to pat his arm to say, dude, you know, let me go. You're scaring me, kind of thing. But no, this is where he goes, okay, tell me what's going on. Like, tell me why this is a lie. And this is where we actually get the true history of Ruijerd, the Superds, and Laplace during the war. And like I said earlier, it was pretty much covered decently in the anime, but I think there's so much emphasis left out that I think puts Ruijerd at the front. It really, the way that the novel describes how this lays out, puts so much emphasis upon Ruijerd as a person, as a Superd, that I don't think the anime is pretty much like, yeah, we went to war with Laplace, they gave us these spears, we didn't want to get rid of the spears, but we had to. I mean, the spears are our life, we took these spears upon ourselves, and the spears were cursed, and it made us, they were really powerful, but it made us kill everybody, friend and family. And it specifically says, and we, as Superds, killed everybody, family, friends, children. And then he says, me as a leader of the Superds, I must reclaim our glory. I must clear our name. So two main key things here. He doesn't specifically single himself out when he says that they went out and killed friends and family alike. You can assume that he did. He says his spear is his son that broke the curse. You can assume he killed his son. But the novel is very specific. It is very specific about what transpired. And additionally, I never really got a sense that he was a leader. I got a sense that he is now the leader of the Superds and that he must clear their name, but I never got a sense that he was their leader at that time. And again, the novel clearly states he was the leader of their warriors. So again, it's similar story, but so much more emphasis on Ruijerd, not Superds. So yes, essentially Laplace rises up. He decides to pull all the races of the Demon Continent together to fight together, all for the sake of taking on the humans of this world, including the Superds. He brings the Superds in. They're exceptional warriors. Nobody can stand up to the exceptional nature of the warriors that are the Superds. Eventually, Laplace comes to the Superds with these Devil Spears. Now, there's an issue here because to the Superds, their spear is their soul, their life, which we get into later on, which was completely shocking to me. These spears are their life, their soul. They're never supposed to let it go. But specifically in the novel, Ruijerd himself, as the leader of the Superd warriors, comes forward and commands his men to drop their spears and take upon themselves the Devil Spears. Ruijerd essentially was the one that cursed all of his men. Well, the ones that were reluctant to give up their spears, which we would assume that pretty much most of them. Specifically, this is a gift from their master, their lord, Laplace, and they must be honored to take upon themselves. So they do it, and they all take upon these spears. They're unmatched. They're super powerful. They run around, they massacre everything, they destroy any enemy before them, and eventually they start to slowly lose their minds. And these spears amplified their physical capabilities several times over. And apparently it nullified the effects of human magic as well. But again, over time, slowly losing their sanity due to this power. It was funny because they even noted the idea that people called them the bloodthirsty devils. And they smiled at this idea. This idea that people feared them, they were happy about it. And even claimed that death brought them bliss from their madness. Now here's where things get crazy and so much more detailed. And again, so much more personal. They get word that a village, specifically Ruijerd's home, is under attack. It was a trap the demon army had set for them. They were out of control and they were afraid of them. So they set a trap claiming that the village was under attack. And so Ruijerd and all of his men went to the village and they immediately started killing everybody. Like, it's so crazy to think, like, they're here and they get word from somebody. There's somebody attacking this home village. You should go save them. And the moment they arrive there, their thought process isn't rescue the people in this village, take all the people and get them to safety. Their thought is immediately, enemy in front of me, destroy the village. It shows their madness. It gives you a perspective of what the Superds were going through, that they couldn't really define enemy or ally. They just seen something before them as a threat and an enemy that they have to destroy. So yes, all the Superds rushing in there, including Ruijerd himself, slaughtering everybody. And the only thing that brings Ruijerd out of it is his son. His son, who it claims that he wasn't the best warrior. His son was a warrior, he was being trained, but he was nowhere near a match for Ruijerd. But his son, thankfully, was able to destroy the spear that Ruijerd was carrying, his devil spear, and it woke him up from his madness. And the moment that he woke up, he felt something crunching between his teeth, and it was his son's finger. It's just so terrible. Like, it's so much more personal. Like, I feel like that's such a more personal story. It makes it more personal to Ruijerd as a person, and not just a thing of, I want to reclaim the glory of the Superds, but I want to get my revenge. And I think that really does play into when he does finally go and assist them in taking down Laplace, which I couldn't remember if it was ever said in the anime. I want to say that it was, but yes, he does mention at some point that following this, in order to reclaim his glory, he wanted to take down Laplace. And eventually he did arrive there. The moment that they were taking down Laplace, he was able to get in there and get one final blow in on Laplace before they sealed him away, obviously. But even then, he's not done. Like, even then, his journey is still just begun because he has to reclaim the glory of the Superds. Anyway, going back to the village, when he wakes up, obviously seeing that he's killed his entire family, he goes around to the remaining 10 members of his army. He had an army of 200 Superds, and he's now down to 10 of them. And he goes around to each one of them and breaks their spears, waking them up. And just at that time, they're surrounded by the demon army that counts 1,000. And so he says that he escapes from the place. He's nearly killed. Like, he has to recover for 3 days. But he escapes. He doesn't know what happened to the other ones, though. Like, his other Superds that were at that village, he doesn't even know if they're still alive. But what was interesting is that he knows that the other 10 members did not blame him. Again, specifically, he did give them the spears. He did order them, command them as their leader to take upon themselves these spears, but they didn't blame him. And I think the more tragic thing is that despite this, going forward, him even going and helping the 3 heroes take down Laplace, it still wasn't enough to clear their name. Even at that point, there's still this discrimination against the Superds. They're feared, and so they're constantly, despite that all this other discrimination's gone, the Superds are still driven from their homes. They're kicked from their homes, kicked out of villages, and he kind of assumes that there might be some that are in a pocket somewhere hiding away, but they've been driven out of society completely. And again, this is his new goal. His goal is to clear that name. So yes, which Ruijerd replies that he will assist him in whatever way he can and try to help him. Doesn't really know how he's going to, but he's going to try to. So yeah, really crazy. Like I said, I really did love that segment, really solidifying, again, how personal this is. I don't remember if they ever did get into the idea that he did help them strike down Laplace. Again, I don't necessarily see that being a big deal to the grander scheme. I don't see the heroes going, oh, thanks, Ruijerd, you're a Superd, aren't you? You're a great hero. Obviously, his name wasn't even documented in the history books. Again, technically, most of the history was written the way they wanted to write it, and Superds is a prime example of that. Whatever they kind of feel is necessary. It was similar to when Ruijerd was reading about the history of the world itself, and it got to that one point where it was talking about the heroes and how they went to all these tribes, the beast tribes and stuff, and got the children of the chieftains to come with them to to essentially be a hostage. And it's like, yeah, I don't think it played out like that. They probably kidnapped the children. I don't think they were willingly going with them. Yes, technically the history is written by the winners, essentially. Moving on to chapter 5, we get them essentially leaving the village. At this point, we do learn about Rokari, which is Roxy's mother. She's 102. He does explain the idea that according to the knowledge that Roxy left him, that Migurds essentially, when they reach the age of 10, they mature physically. And they won't visibly age beyond that point until they reach 150. So Roxy's going to be pretty much looking like she does until she reaches 150 years old, which is, all right, it's another plus for Roxy. But it was cute, them talking about Roxy and how they would never imagine that Roxy would be teaching somebody anything. But he mentioned the idea that she's taught me so many things, and they offhandedly say that they were a little bit surprised or shocked by that statement, and it kind of implies that, he's saying something else. I don't know. But it was cute, him saying, can I call you dad now? And he's like, no. And with a really stern face, and he said that he was very nostalgic for Roxy, seeing that kind of poker face that he had. This is the part where Rowan gives him the sword. And really nothing was mentioned about the sword in the anime, but specifically here he mentions that it was something that was brought to the village by a traveling blacksmith. And it's a very interesting sword, like much more than just being a random sword. Again, he says that a blacksmith brought it to the village some time ago. Even after all these years, it's still in perfect condition. It's clean, it's beautiful, it's oddly threatening, as he states, basically how the blade is laid out. He says that it's a dull gray steel that glowed faintly. They also get a bag of currency from them, and as he's leaving, he mentioned the idea that he hopes one day that he'll meet Roxy again, and that he someday can hopefully repay them for their courtesy. I think I'm going to leave it at that for this part. We are just barely getting into chapter 5. I hope you guys enjoyed this run through of volume 3. I think volume 3 might be less parts than usual unless we get started getting some really crazy stuff later on. Of course, we always have that last chapter that's always something crazy, but I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, if you did, make sure to hit that like button down below, comment, let me know did I miss anything that was different from the anime that was significant in there. Again, if you know the source material, if you know something beyond the first season and what I've covered in the novel series, please keep those spoilers to yourself until we arrive at those moments, then we can talk about that stuff. If you've not already, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you get all my content, and as I do other videos of this, so you can join us for that. Additionally, I do news, reviews, first impressions. If it's anime, it's pretty much here. Additionally, if you want to support the channel more, we have a Patreon link and a tips link and a super thanks button down below. I would greatly appreciate if you guys consider supporting us, and y'all take care.